This is Rodrigo Arancibia from the High Tech High Graduate School of Education, and I'm here to talk to you about EdSpace, a social learning network. Well, what is EdSpace? EdSpace is a place for you to connect and get curious with the people that you want to connect with. But what EdSpace isn't is a popularity contest like Twitter. It's not a place for you to sit and listen and sit and get like YouTube. EdSpace TV is a personal channel for you to do your own vlogging to tell your story about your experiences. Not comfortable with video yet? It's all good. Every single channel is going to have post-it boards. Write your question down on the post-it board and someone will respond to you with a video post. Social media networks are noisy. That's why we created EdSpace filters. On every single channel, you'll be able to drill down on which educators you want to learn from and which educators you want to get curious with. Whether you're a second grade teacher in Arkansas or a project-based learning teacher in San Diego, use the EdSpace filters to find your people and get curious with them. EdSpace has two types of channels: public channels that everybody can view and everybody can access, and private channels that only teachers from your school can see. Cool thing is, you can also see which teachers from your school site are signed up for EdSpace. So what's next? Introduce yourself. Pin a video to your personal channel and tell us what you're curious about. Tell us what you're working on. Tell us what you're passionate about. The most important thing is that you get started. Show up and share more.
A warm welcome, everybody, to Inspired Conference Day 1, Future of Schools with Tanya Sheckley. The theme for the session today is eliminating the need for special education and reimagining special education. This inspiring session will talk about shattering the expectation gaps by looking at inclusive education as the norm and not as being needed to be termed as special education. What if we can create a place where we can nurture creativity and curiosity, where children can create and problem solve together? What if we can create a school where children can look at different perspectives, where they all can work together? Using a neurodevelopment framework, Tanya and her team at Up Academy have reimagined education for access for every child. Up Academy teaches communication, collaboration, and problem-solving skills to prepare students for a future we cannot imagine. As we get started, first get ready to be inspired with the legacy of a little girl called Eliza and the story of a superhero dog called Harold. Welcome, Tanya, to Inspired Conference, kickstarting Day 1, Future of Schools, eliminating the need for special education, reimagining special education, closing the expectation gap, and creating possibilities. Welcome, Tanya. Hello.
Thank you, Vanitha. Hello. I'm so happy to be here and so excited to be able to share and talk about everything that's going on.
Thank you, Tanya. Tanya Sheckley is founder and president of Up Academy, an elementary lab school which values innovation, empathy, and strength, and incorporates a unique neurodevelopment program for children with physical disabilities. Up Academy teaches communication, collaboration, and problem-solving skills to prepare students for a future we can't imagine. Tanya is a social entrepreneur, writer, and national speaker. Tanya, I'd like to start with a quote, two quotes from you. There is a big gap between what is possible for our children and often what society expects them to accomplish. To have an education with seamless access to therapeutic support and academic standards, that would be truly challenging. Tanya, can you start with telling us a little bit about your journey and the truly, truly inspiring story and legacy of Eliza?
Of course. So my journey in education really started with the birth of my daughter, Eliza. Previous to that, I was in sales and marketing with a consumer goods company. But having children changes you, as anyone who has children knows. And my interests definitely changed. And with Eliza's birth, it was quite different than with other children. We knew early on that she was going to have some challenges within the first couple of weeks when we were in the NICU, in the neonatal intensive care unit. We were told that she would never be normal. I actually had a doctor walk up to me and tell me that your daughter will never be normal. And so you start off with this in the first couple of weeks of life with this understanding that things are going to be different. And I never believed that. I looked at this sweet and beautiful little girl and I thought, how can this not turn out well? Like she's beautiful, she's perfect, she's gonna do great. And I continued to have that attitude throughout her life. And she started to grow and she did have challenges and she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And we worked with different organizations all over the country and all over the world to find her the right therapeutics that were going to help her overcome her brain injury. Because cerebral palsy it's not a medical condition, it's a neurological condition. And so I learned a lot about neuroplasticity and neurodevelopment and child development and how children learn throughout that time period of trying my best to support her and help her to become everything that she could become. And from what we know of brain development, or from what we currently believe, so much of it happens in the first 5 years of life. And so I knew that I kind of had this ticking time bomb of finding the right things within the amount of time to be able to make the greatest impact. And of course, we know the brain continues to keep learning and changing as we move through life, but those first 5 years are really critical. So after doing all of this searching and after working with different organizations all over the world, we came to the school system and came in and said, look, we found these things that work. She's sitting independently after 6 weeks of conductive education. She's able to take some steps, not quite independently, but holding onto a ladder and be able to be much more independent and pull herself up and sit down. And, you know, can we work with your paraprofessionals? Can we work with her aide who's going to be working with her? Can we train them? Can we bring some of these therapies into the school? And the school district said, no, we're not required to do that. We're not going to pay for that. That's not accepted. And they gave me a whole list of different precedents from court cases and talked about IDEA, the Disabilities Education Act, and talked about ADA and all of these things and the reasons why they were not going to support what we were asking. And we just knew there needed to be a better way. I could see it in my head how the integration could work and how the educational method could work. And watching her as she started in the classroom with her peers and how interactive they were with the project-based learning style of the school, it really made me understand how a system for inclusive education could look. And so we continued looking all over the world for the right educational fit, and we really didn't find it. And the school district they're doing their best. You know, schools, especially in the United States, schools are asked to do so many different things for so many different people. And that's never what they were designed to do. They're designed to educate a large group of people in one particular way. And they do that very well. And we, you know, had many, many meetings with a team of people who are all very wonderful, good-hearted people, but still weren't getting the services and the things that we knew were going to really push her forward in independence. And so after looking at all of our options and after starting school and after learning more about project-based learning and seeing her in an inclusive environment, we decided to open our own school. And so the idea for Up Academy was born. I started talking with other parents about the frustrations that they also had and found out that I definitely was not alone. There were many other parents feeling the same frustrations that I was, that they had intelligent, curious, capable children who, for some reason or another, had a disability, had a challenge, had something that was holding them back, and they weren't getting the right challenges and the right supports consistently in their learning with their schools. And so they were interested in something different. And so that was really the idea for Up Academy.
Thanks, Tanya. And you know, you speak about not expecting less from Eliza. You always knew that she was just going to be like another any other normal child in the classroom. You knew that, in your mind that she was going to, be able to learn and be able to go to college even. And I think that's a big part of the push and the understanding of shattering the expectation gap. And we will speak a little bit more about this in the questions below. Just to pivot back to public schools and how they often lack the support and infrastructure needed to support inclusive education. What are the immediate steps that can be taken to bridge this gap, in your opinion?
Well, I think part of it's what you just said, understanding that there is this expectations gap. And, one of our earliest IEP meetings, just as an example, her individualized education plan, one of her earliest IEP meetings, we went in and she was in the top half of her class. She's reading above grade level. She's doing 3-digit math in kindergarten. And they're asking me what her educational goals were and if she was going to graduate at 18 or stay in school until 22, which is a possibility with special education in the States. And I looked at them, I'm like, she's graduating at 17 and going to Stanford. Like, why are you asking me this question? She's 6 and we're already putting limits on what's possible for our kids. So I think the first part of breaking through that is getting to that understanding that all of our kids are capable learners and assuming their competence. So if they can't tell us what they know or what they don't know, kind of assuming that they're understanding what we're explaining, and then finding a way to integrate that into something where we can go back and figure out, okay, did they get this or did they not? And do I need to recover it? The same way we do with any child, but understanding that those expectations should really be the same for all of our students. And that's not to say we're all going to learn at the same pace and we're all going to understand at the same pace. I mean, no 2 children are alike, regardless of ability or disability. We all learn at different paces. But understanding that that's just one piece of it and that students are capable. And so changing that idea. I think the second piece of that is providing the professional development to get to the point where educators understand and know how to integrate that in the classroom and are moving their lessons from an idea of memorization and learning just content to being able to do project-based learning and concept-based learning, where now we have a competency model versus a content model. And so that also engages all of our learners in a much deeper way so that we can all learn together at our own pace and bring out our own strengths.
Yeah, absolutely, Tanya. And can you tell us a little bit how this is being modeled at UP Academy?
Yeah, of course. So at UP, we've developed a full neurodevelopment program to support our students in time when they need it. So the idea of not everything being equal, everybody doesn't get the same thing, but everybody gets what they need when they need it. One of the big challenges with the model in the US is that students do get supports and they do get therapies and they do get support, but they get it at times that it's convenient for the school schedule or the therapist schedule or the adult schedule, not the student schedule. And so one of the big things that we do is we integrate everything. And so it makes sense to students, it's functional and it's consistent with their peers. So our speech and language pathologists are in the classroom when all the students are working on speech and language. And so it makes sense that we're working on our letter sounds when everybody else is working on their letter sounds. Instead of a system where, we understand you need speech and language, and so we're going to pull you out of physical education to go do speech know language. And it's just going to be you. And then that doesn't make sense and it doesn't correlate and it's not as functional. And we know that, all of us learn better when it's relevant and functional. So providing accessible curriculum. So we're not modifying the curriculum. We're not saying we're going to change this because you are not good enough to do it. We're saying we're going to change this in a way that you can do it. And it's a very subtle shift between modifying the curriculum into something that's different and making the curriculum accessible so that everybody can do it. But it also gives those students, the feeling and the belief that my teachers believe in me and my therapists believe in me, and everybody in this class knows that I can do the same work. I just need to do it a different way. So providing that accessibility.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. And you know, that really resonates with us in this part of the world, at least. You know, it's so teacher centric. We are trying to get away from that and, you know, shift the focus to the learners, you know, cognitive learning, understanding why they're learning, what they're learning. And there's been a great push, I must say, you know, to embrace 21st century cooperative learning. So you can put, you know, a label to everything, but at the end of the day, it really is not on your schedule, but on, you know, the learner's ability and schedule. And I love what you said about not changing the curriculum, but adapting it so that, you know, the child will be able to learn the same thing, but just in a different way or in a different method. Thank you, Tanya. Children with disabilities have intense desires to succeed and push through their cognitive levels of learning, as we've discussed. What are some of the tools set in place to allow for this to happen?
Well, I think it's not just children with disabilities. I think all children, really have an intense desire to succeed. Absolutely. And it's part of the art of teaching and the art of being an educator to figure out where that limit is and how far you can push them and challenge them before the challenge is too great and they want to give up, but also keep them challenged enough so they're not getting bored and they want to continue to push forward. You know, and really, you know, like I said before, and like we were talking about, our school systems are often designed just to teach children in one way. But if we can adapt that and we can change that and we can morph it and we can allow all students to learn in their best way and still get the basic knowledge that they need to be successful, that's when we're really doing them the best that, you know, giving them the best that we possibly can. It reminds me of a quote, and I'm sure you've heard of this one: if you try to judge a fish by how he can climb a tree, he'll live his whole life believing that he's stupid.
It's a failure,
and it's the same idea. You know, if you have a student and you continually try to teach them how to do things one way and it doesn't work, now they're thinking that they're stupid and they're not getting it, when that's not necessarily true. It could be the system that's failing them, or a subject matter that's particularly difficult, or they may have other challenges. You know, in my daughter Eliza's case, it was a physical disability, but also things, you know, like ADD and some aspects of autism spectrum, and definitely dyslexia and dysgraphia and dyscalculia, like all these other things can cause a child to feel like they're stupid when they're not. Not at all. And I recently had a conversation with a parent of a child who was twice exceptional. And it was the same sort of conversation, in that her child wasn't getting what she needed at school and was feeling like she was stupid, but she's not. She's dyslexic, but extraordinarily intelligent. She's, you know, 7 now, and she's doing high school microbiology, but she's still struggling to write a paragraph. And so we all learn in different ways. So I think the next piece of that are providing the tools in the classroom for success. You know, the lessons that are accessible, creating a safe space for questions, allowing students to be wrong and to understand that mistakes are part of the process. It's another thing that we see a lot here is nobody wants to ask a question because everybody wants to be right. And there's a huge emphasis on getting the question right. And when you have a system that's based in content and memorization, there is a right and a wrong. But in life, you know, as you move on, as you get a job, sure, there's still right and wrong, but there's a lot more shades of gray. And so if we move into this competency model and a concept model where they're understanding, you know, a concept of things and bringing out their curiosity, and it's a part of the learning process to ask questions, and not because you want to be right or wrong, but really because you want to know. You know, that's where it starts to become magical, and where all students really see that success. Moving away from rote learning into, like you say, activity and, you know, activity-based learning is so powerful. And, you know, for our listeners today, and I know, you know, they're educators and teachers, and I'm a teacher myself,
The one thing that has helped me to shift into the space, Tanya, is to get myself out of a fixed mindset into a growth mindset. And, just looking at, there's so many wonderful tools out there that will allow you to achieve goals for differentiated learning, learning for children with different levels. You just need to be able to just extract that and understand who your students are. And it is doable. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tanya. Up Academy is built on the premise that all children are capable learners, all children. What does a day in your classroom look like? And how do you integrate the mainstream and special needs children into the delivery of lessons by teachers and activity output from the students?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think our classroom honestly looks a lot like anybody else's classroom. There's just a slightly different mix of students that you might see when you walk in, and some more adults because some of those students are getting more support. But an educator is still providing a lot of information, and the students are still working in activity centers or in differentiated learning groups, or they might be doing a math game, or they might be doing some blended learning and doing something on an iPad. And all of our students are still participating in all of these groups and working together. So aside from the fact that you might see a wheelchair, or you might see, a student answering a math question by pointing to a flashcard instead of saying it verbally. Other than that, our classrooms look like anyone else's. There's no separation. There's no special education room. Everyone's together. Everyone's in the classroom. It gives all of our children the same experiences and the same expectations to be curious and to problem solve and to collaborate together. And part of that comes from the educator as well, and setting up the classroom from a social emotional standpoint and from a class agreement, understanding that all of us, regardless of how we look, regardless of our culture, regardless of our background, regardless of our abilities, we all learn slightly differently, but we're all the same, and we're all human, and we all belong, and we all have feelings. And teaching students that we are all going to be different from each other, and we are all going to learn differently, and that's okay. Not only is that okay, but that's part of how we're going to be better, because we get to learn how other people learn, which helps us to be more knowledgeable and more helpful as we grow up. So providing them, students the opportunity to understand themselves, to understand their self-management, to understand their self-regulation, and to understand how we're different, but really that we're all the same, that we're all human, and we all want to learn, and we're all curious, and providing that base of a classroom for all of our students to work together is really, really part of what makes it successful.
Yeah. And not creating that separation, because, if you put that separation in place, it's going to be obvious. It's going to be there. Children are going to know, something special about this child. But if all of those barriers are removed and they come into an environment and see everything is the same, then in their minds as well, it's there's nothing different, maybe just in a wheelchair, and I'm on a chair. So and
we're all in a chair.
We're all in a chair, Tanya. Yes, and it's such a beautiful thing. I sometimes it's easier said than done, because of such structures that are, if I could use the word, destructive structures that are put in place to label and to separate. And if we could just break all of that down and in the first glance, create that seamless space for learning for every child, I think we've won half the battle. Yeah.
And that's one of the really cool things about having an elementary school, because all of those structures and those labels are things that we're taught that adults have made up, and kids don't have any of that. Kids just see kids. And so if you
Yes.
walk in and you don't provide them with all of these things, you know, when I was a kid, special education was a dark room in the back of the school. It was scary. You didn't go there. The door was
Yeah.
always closed. And so
Yeah.
there was this separation. But if you start out differently and you start out with everyone together and sharing that we're just all people and we're learning together, you get a completely different outlook and different outcome, because kids really do just see kids.
Absolutely.
In fact, I can show you some pictures of what learning looks like.
Yes, please.
So you can see here is our play structure with all of our kids in different varying poses.
Yeah.
And the kids who need extra support are getting extra support. But all of our kids are playing together. This is just recess. They were all hanging out and decided to do a picture.
Yeah.
You can see up in the upper right, we're actually walking. We walk to physical education one day a week. There's a gymnastics studio nearby, and so we go to gymnastics. And these are our students buddying up. And so they were buddies. So they're holding hands, crossing the street, walking together on the sidewalk. And every student has a buddy. And then the bottom picture, that looks like it got cut off a little bit. The bottom photo is a field trip. And you can see all of our students together walking around an art museum with an interactive art display there.
Oh,
And then here's a few more. Up in the upper right is us again out on a field trip, and the kids are just sitting around a tree reading a book together during a break time at lunch. And the students just integrate together because they're all in class together. And then the large picture in the middle is from a kindergarten presentation of project-based learning, where the kids were talking about trees that they had studied throughout the year. So it was a project where they went and looked at the same tree in the fall, in the winter, and again in the spring. And this is their presentation of their findings. So this is a group of kindergartners. And you can see there's a talker button that one of the girls is holding. So they each have their part to talk. And this is my daughter, Eliza. Hers was just pre-recorded because she's not verbal. So she had scripted out what she wanted to say. Someone says it for her in a talker, and then she's able to hit the button when it's her time. And so she's participating fully in a presentation when she's 5 in kindergarten. And then the bottom picture is our little dog, Harold. So our school has a canine ambassador who also has disabilities, who just helps us open that conversation between humans and canines and people, and how we're all different.
Yes. Thank you, Tanya. That was really amazing visuals. Thank you so much. Can we talk a little bit about assessments? I know this is maybe not people. If a school is academically driven, that's usually the core focus. How is the child assessed? How is my child assessed for parents? How is assessment done in Up Academy?
Sure. So because we look more at competencies, I mean, we're still covering core standards. It's elementary school. And so there are just things that kids need to learn. They need to learn to read. They need to get to a certain level of competency in reading. They need to learn to write and different styles of writing. They need basic math skills. They need to understand scientific principles, forces of nature and states of matter, and, these things. And so there are things that we definitely have to cover. But our assessment is really done, we don't believe in testing students. We don't sit them down. We don't have them write out answers to things. And a lot of it is a summative assessment done by the educator, because our class sizes are so small. She knows what everybody's doing and where their levels are. And then we grade them on a scale from emerging to mastery. So if something's been introduced and maybe they've seen it, but they don't always understand it, they can't explain it, they don't get the answer right, maybe it's an emerging skill. And then they move into proficient, where they get it right most of the time. They understand it when you're talking about it, they get it, it makes sense, they're proficient in that piece. The next one is, it moves along up to mastery. And then in mastery level, you are able to use it wherever you go. You can transfer the knowledge to different situations. You can explain it to other people. You can teach it to other people. And so we look at assessment kind of on this competency scale from, I've heard about this, to I know this so well I can teach you about it. And we use that not only for our academics, but also for our graduate standards when we're looking at a student's executive functioning and ability to set goals and understand how to use their time or their social emotional behavior, and is it age appropriate, and is it progressing the way that they should be? Are they building the empathy and the empathetic action in their lives? You know, and we look at it with influencing action and you know, all of our graduate standards as well along that same kind of scale of where our students are.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. And a side question: how does this fit into the national accreditation boards in the U.S.? I'm sure some people are asking because here in this region, that certification is very important for you to go on to you know, foundational or tertiary education. How does that fit in? Is there you know, some kind of a provision for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the educational structure here is a little bit different. There is a set of standards that schools, you know, definitely that the public schools use and prescribe to. Many of the private schools are kind of able to wiggle around and create their own curriculum within that set of standards. And then the accreditation system, you know, works to come in and say, yes, this curriculum is going to provide students what they need to be successful, or hey, we think that your curriculum isn't as tight. We need you to fix X, Y, Z, or add something else, you know, to make it all work together. As a new school, we're kind of in that framework where we're building what's happening. And we do, and most private schools do, we're loosely following the Common Core standards, but there are all sorts of other standards out there that we're following as well. We're looking at the tolerance standards for social justice. We're looking at CASEL standards for social emotional learning. We're looking at NGSS standards for science. We're looking at ISTE standards for technology and technological ethics. And so we're able to pull in all of these different things to really have a much more well-rounded student experience. But of course, the goal, you know, for us and for any school is to prepare kids for middle school and for life beyond that.
Yeah, and how important that communication with, you know, education boards, you know, educators up in policy level is crucial. And you know, us as teachers and advocates for that, that's one of the most, I think, important chunks of work that we have to continue to do, to be that voice to enable this type of a structure to be put in place in our schools. Thank you, Tanya. Can we speak a little bit about parent, community, teacher, student engagement? How important is this in building trust and support?
It's the only way to build trust and support. You know, our parents are our community, and building that community and having them involved in the school is extraordinarily important. And especially when you're looking at a little bit of a different type of learning, continuing that communication. So we, and a lot of the project-based kind of schools I've seen will do, you know, a monthly or a bi-monthly classroom meeting. So all the parents get together in the classroom and see what's going on and hear from their educator about what they're learning and what's coming next. 3 times a year, we have exhibition days for our students, so they can show off their projects and what they've worked on, not only to their parents, but also to any other family member or community member that wants to come, and to the parents of all of their friends in school. You know, they get this exhibition day to show off their work. But also just community building from a social aspect, and doing things like ice cream socials and movie afternoon get-togethers, just so the families can get together and chat and connect. And you know, I mean, especially now when we're all so disconnected, having that sense of connection and that sense of belonging is really imperative within any school community.
Yeah. You know, we've got one of our speakers coming on that said we are so now digitally connected but socially disconnected. Yeah, that's, you know, quite a true statement. And I know of teachers in our schools here that have gone and done home visits because, in Malaysia particularly, we have communities that are rural, we have communities that, have working hours that are late at night sometimes, and we've both parents are working and, just to support children, big families in homes, and they're not able to do regular hour school visits. And we've had teachers go out of their way, go back, after hours and visit them in homes to talk about, their children's progress and learning. And this was actually happening in a school that was catering for special needs children. So yes, that type of, I think, again, future of skills is so important to understand that you need to just step out of your framework. These are my working hours. I'm not going to do anything beyond that, but understand that it does require an extension sometimes. And that's, such a wonderful thing that I've seen happen here. Tanya, how have you seen the needle shift in parental engagement for inclusive learning? Do they participate? Are they part of the decision making?
Part of the decision making as far as
what's happening in the classroom, as far as feedback given for a particular child, perhaps in the challenges they're facing at home, and relating that to the teachers for classroom engagements.
Yeah. Well, there's a solid connection between our teachers and our parents for sure. And we're always engaged in feedback with all of our families. In fact, it's one of the things that made our distance learning program so successful in the spring, and enabled us to seamlessly move from in-person to distance, was all of the feedback that we get from our parents and the strong community that we have. I do find, it's interesting, when we first launched the school, a lot of our conversations with the board were around, okay, we're building this amazing thing for students with disabilities. How are we going to get everyone else to come? And, our family is going to want to have this inclusive environment. Are they going to want to put their kids into a classroom with everybody who has such a different range of abilities and learning styles? And what we found is an overwhelming yes. That parents are excited to come to school, that parents are really interested in the diversity that the school offers, especially being that we are a private school. So many private schools tend to cater to one type of student. And there definitely is a kind of an overarching type of student that does best in our school. But because of the wide range of diversity, because we're teaching foreign languages, we teach Mandarin and Spanish in the class as well. And we teach, the cultural background around countries that speak those languages, and we celebrate those festivals and cultures and all of those of any of our students. And having this wide range of diversity in culture, in language, in ability, is really something that draws parents into the school, that they really find appealing, which we had concerns about early on. And it turns out that when you give people the opportunity to be a part of something new and different, they take it and they get excited.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Yeah, and I've seen that as well here. Giving that opportunity, and then again, parents find out that they have a passion or they have a particular skill that could be very useful, and all of a sudden, there's this ownership that that takes place, and that's a real desire and a push, and it creates a passion to come back in and serve, and that's a beautiful thing to bring out. I feel. Yeah. Thank you, Tanya. Shattering the expectation gap. Can you give us a definition of what this means?
I can, yeah. And actually, I did a speaking event not long ago about this. And so I'm going to share that with you to kind of talk about the background of the expectation gap and what that means.
Okay, who here has children? I see a show of hands. If you don't have children, who has nieces and nephews? That's most of you. Who has ever seen a baby? Okay, great. I want you to think back to that special child And think of the expectations you had when they were born. We all have expectations. Maybe you wanted them to be a doctor or a lawyer. Maybe you wanted them to be a soccer star or a baseball player. I had expectations too. I had complications late in my pregnancy, and a few days after my daughter Eliza was born, a doctor came to us and told us she would never be normal. He said she would never be normal. Eliza was observant and intelligent. She couldn't speak verbally, and she used a wheelchair. Think for a moment if that were your child. How would that change your expectations? I can tell you how it changed my expectations. It didn't at all. Not even a little bit. I expected my little girl to grow up, to go to Stanford, to play sports, to be a doctor or a writer or anything she wanted to be. But that's not always how society sees it. There's a big gap between what is possible for our children and often what society expects us to accomplish. I call this the expectations gap. We looked all over the world for the right school for our daughter. She needed support to talk and to walk and to participate. We wanted a place that would help her with her independence, but also have strong academics. A place where all three of our children could learn together, where they could all grow, learn, and thrive. A place that would allow each of them to focus on their strengths. The world is changing. The rise of artificial intelligence and autonomous technology, cars are driving themselves. Doctors can do surgery with robots. All of these things could be a possibility for my daughter if she had the right education. We searched and searched. We didn't find a place that would develop the strengths of all three of our children. So we started to wonder, what if we could create a place that would nurture creativity and curiosity? What if we could create a place where children could collaborate and problem solve together? What if we could create a school where kids could look from different perspectives, where they could all work together, that would challenge their emotional growth and give them the opportunity to learn from people who were different from them? What if we could do all of this and make it inclusive of students with physical disabilities? It will be our humanity, our ability to communicate and look at the world from different perspectives that will set us apart and help our children be successful in the coming decades. So like I said in the video, it's really this big gap between what we expect of our students and what's possible for our students. And filling this expectations gap, not just for our students with disabilities, but for all of our students, is really the magic of education. Our students know what their possibilities are. I think all of us have had that experience of knowing that you were capable of doing something and trying to explain it to someone else, and them having them tell you that you were too young or didn't have enough experience, or whatever else the reason was. But we're consistently doing this to our students. And so when we shift from that expectation of where they should be to understanding the possibility of where they could be, we really push them to be more and allow them to share their ideas and to know that they're okay and to know that they're safe and to grow in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, and I want to use the word doable. I just visualize it in my mind as well. And I have been in classrooms here in Malaysia that are, I think, endeavoring to get to this place, Tanya. And just one or two pointers for teachers who are struggling. What would you say the first things that they should get onto to make this shift?
I think the first things to really look at is just who is in our classroom, and what are their strengths. because we spend so much time in educational meetings and here in the States in IEP meetings, and as a parent with a child with disabilities in doctors meetings and therapist meetings, talking about everybody's weaknesses and all the things they can't do. When if we shift that narrative and we look at their strengths and what can they do, where are their interests, what are they really good at, and start there. And then we're sparking interest, we're getting buy-in, we're getting relevance, we're getting curiosity, because now we've met the student and met the child where they are. Now we're listening to what they're saying and what they want and who they are. And really that's the first step to building that relationship and to building the competency of all of our students.
Absolutely. And, you know, we have our speaker coming on speaking about collective impact initiatives. And you have a wonderful project that you have done that incorporates community engagement, as well as innovation, as well as collaboration. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Are you talking about our project with Harold?
Yes.
Yes. So one of our graduate standards is influencing action. And so how do we take all of these skills, our problem solving, our scientific mind, our engineering skills, how do we take all of these things and use them to create something in the world, to influence an action? And in this past school year, we used it in collaboration with a Mountain View High School, a group of engineering capstone students, to create a prosthetic device for our disabled therapy dog, who you saw in a photo a little earlier. And so it was a really great project. You know, all of the kids really got involved. They built prototypes in the STEAM lab. They presented to the high schoolers their prototypes, and you know, watched through the entire engineering process as then the high schoolers made their prototypes, and then they came back and tried them out, and our students got to give them feedback on what they thought worked and what they thought didn't work and how they could make it better and what it was missing. And then they went back and made another prototype, and we went through this cycle. And our students got to go to the high school, to the engineering lab, because one of the things, you know, that we say, I think that most educators say, like, if you can't see it, you can't become it. So taking the students actually to the engineering lab where they can see big 3D printers and laser printers and drill presses and power tools and all of the devices and materials that the high schoolers had available to them to create. And doing that field trip and trying out another prototype. And then we get to the end of the project, and you'll see the news clip here in just a moment, the culmination of Harold actually getting his device.
Meet Harold. This paralyzed pup is the ambassador of Up Academy in San Mateo, who doesn't let his lack of mobility ruin his attitude.
Well, he is the happiest and most smiley dog.
And now you can add Speedy. After a year of work, Harold received this fiberglass sleeve with wheels designed by Up Academy students and developed by the Mountain View High School capstone engineering class.
It was really neat, definitely tricky, definitely some parts where we were a little confused, not sure what to do, but it's really cool to see what happened at the end.
Being able to give him something to kind of like put him at the same level as like every other dog's experience is really meaningful. I myself don't have a dog, but I love dogs and I think they're really great. And you know, the concept of them being our companion, we should be able to treat them with the same love that we treat ourselves.
Up Academy founder Tanya Sheckley and her family rescued Harold around a year ago, and helping him with mobility was a benefit for Harold and the students alike.
This project has really given all of our students, you know, from kindergarten 5-year-olds to our 3rd grade 9-year-olds, the opportunity to really see how the things that they're learning can make a difference and influence the world around them.
And these students are very proud of their work.
Harold's new wheels are terrific.
I think Harold's happy because he's running around and eating grass and he looks like he's enjoying it. Doesn't matter if we like it or not, it matters if he likes it.
You think he likes it?
Yeah.
I think one of the greatest things about the project was that they also developed a website to be able to share the information and the knowledge with other people around the country and around the world. So not only Harold will have a smile, but dogs all over the world will get a smile on their face.
Helping man's best friend, one smile at a time.
Thanks for that, Tanya. What a brilliant evidence and show of collaboration. You know, this generation is so cause-driven. They look for a voice, they look for a platform, and that what ownership comes back in again. and that has, incorporated all of these elements into giving these high school kids a opportunity to be part of Up Academy. And I will tell you, Harold is now officially Inspired Conference mascot and honorary citizen. Can we do that? Can we adopt him?
He'll be very excited about that.
Okay. Pivoting into the theme of inclusion, equity, and access. Yeah. Up Academy isn't designed to just help students with physical disabilities. We've spoken about this. Project-based and experiential learning, coupled with social emotional learning, are all parts of the curriculum. How has this type of learning environment supported inclusivity and improved learning outcomes for every child?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we've kind of danced around that a little bit in our conversation so far. But with project-based learning, it really allows each student to draw on their strengths and also to learn from their peers to enhance their weaknesses. Yeah. So when you have a group, especially we do all mixed age groups, when you have a group together, it allows students, who understand, who have mastered something, to be able to teach down to the other students. And it also allows the students who maybe have an emerging skill to be able to learn up from those above them. And with projects, it always allows for creativity, for individual, individual takes on the project, looking at it from different angles from each student, individualized creativity that all comes together as a whole. And so when we engage students by teaching projects and by teaching concepts, we really encourage their deeper learning because we're meeting each student where they are. And it allows each student to participate. So if we were just sitting in a desk and learning information, some of those students are sitting in a desk, but they're not learning the information. Mm-hmm. And some of those students might be learning the information, but they'd be doing it a lot better if they were behind their desk dancing, right? Or moving around, or allowed to stand, or allowed to sit on a wobble seat. But when we engage everyone into a project, now all of these students are engaged and they're learning and they're involved. And so it really brings them into, from a passive emotional state into an active emotional state. And that's where we learn best. And it draws in everyone. There's no one that's left out of a project because everyone has a curiosity. And everyone has creativity and everyone can contribute to what we're doing. Yeah. It's like even in the picture I showed of my daughter in their project presentation, like that's just the final culmination. It's not all of the work they did there, but even in that, everyone has a little piece and is participating actively in their learning and in their sharing. Yeah.
And we know the VAKs of learning, the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic ways that children learn, and to incorporate that is very key in the situation. Tanya, I know, it's sometimes seems like it's all an easy road, but there has been challenges. And talk to us a little bit for our listeners today. What are some of the key challenges that you have faced, and really sometimes pull your hair out around in this situation?
Well, definitely, around opening the school and just the entrepreneurship journey had its challenges for sure. At one point we utilized our only male board member to write all of our emails to prospective locations because I wasn't getting emails back. And surprisingly, it worked amazingly well. And here there's so many laws around zoning and where you can have kids and where you can't have kids. And so creating a space for learning was definitely a challenge. Moving into opening a school and finding the right people, because we're really looking for a special type of educator who has the experience of working with lots of different types of kids, but is also really creative and flexible and open-minded and willing to try new things. And not only willing to, but really wants to try new things, like wants to push that edge of what we're doing in education. And so those are definitely things that I've seen as challenges as an entrepreneur. When we look at the challenges the school is facing, you know, there's so much resistance to change in education. And it's one of the things I'm really, really excited about right now, because the only thing that's happening in education right now is change. And so it's made it both a really, really exciting and really, really stressful time to be in education. But it's really fun to see all of the changes and the shifts in traditional education and how they're moving to different models and embracing different things. So overcoming that resistance from the educational system, and resistance from parents. You know, as a parent of a child with a disability, like I said, I never really saw her disability. I saw a little girl who was curious and intelligent and needed to get the best education she could, because her physical body wasn't going to allow her to do so many different careers. It was really important that she had, you know, her other assets were really strong. But that's not what parents are told. A lot of parents hear what they're told from the beginning. They're here, your child isn't going to be normal. They hear your child can't walk, your child can't talk, your child can't learn, your child can't keep up. And so that becomes their inner narrative instead of looking at the possibilities. They're looking at what's been laid out as an expectation. So overcoming that resistance and just sharing that your child is capable of so much more if we give them the opportunity. You know, and then in the classroom, I think the last piece of that in the classroom is shifting from, like we talked about, that teacher who's just sharing knowledge, to a teacher who's really facilitating the sharing of information. And it's this idea from going from an educator who's teaching information to a learning engineer who's creating a classroom experience. And that's it's a big shift in how we look at education. You know, it's a big shift in, as an educator, how much are you talking to the class? You know, because most educators are talking 80 to 90% of the time, whereas really when we flip that, our students should be talking 70 to 80% of the time and asking the questions and driving the learning. But that's a really big shift. And so how do we support educational structures to move into a learner-centered model where they can be creative and collaborate and learn communication in a much stronger environment?
And Up Academy uses a neurodevelopment program framework and interaction around the child's schedule. We've touched a little bit about this. For our listeners today, neurodevelopment is the brain's ability to develop neurological pathways responsible for the normal functioning of the brain's ability to learn, focus, develop memories, and social skills. Tell us a little bit about how this is incorporated into Up Academy's daily routine, Tanya.
Sure. So from a basic philosophy of the school, we know from the neuroscience of learning that, you know, we learn better when we're in an active, aroused emotional state versus a passive emotional state. And we know we learn best when we can connect concepts with experiences. Again, so we're getting active in our own learning. A teacher actually shared a story with me earlier this week about her favorite science lesson when she was a kid. And their teacher didn't tell them what they were going to do. She took them out on the playground and she made them all go down the slide over and over again. And you can start to see where this is going and what this might be a lesson on. But she had them then all just observe each other. Hey, you've gone down the metal slide 4 times. What do you notice? Does anybody notice anything about her hair? You know, and the kid's hair is standing up all over. And it's a lesson on static electricity. And so then after going down the slide, you know, 6 times, all of them, and observing each other and talking about what they see and what they felt and what happened when they touched something metal, then they go inside and learn about static electricity. And, you know, this 30-something-year-old woman is sharing this story with me because that's what she remembers from elementary science. Because they've connected a concept with an experience and really allowed the kids to experience it first and then share the concept. And so from a learning standpoint, we know that's how we learn the best. It's how we retain information the best. And so then translating that into a student who has a neurological challenge, you know, who has a brain injury, who's overcoming something, when we can connect those concepts, why should I use a talker to talk, with an experience of being in English language arts with everyone else, so learning is consistent, now that functionality of the learning comes a lot faster. And so that's the basis of why we integrate all of our therapeutics and why we keep everything in time with our peers. That combined with just when you're constantly pulling kids out, you have a child who, just by their very nature, it takes them longer to complete things, and now you're giving them less time because you've taken them out of English language arts to take them to physical therapy, and now they don't have enough time. But logistics aside, we know that, you know, neurologically, we learn better when it's all connected and functional and relevant. So our neurodevelopment program is also based in conductive education, which, for those who haven't heard of conductive education, it's a educational system, an educational lifestyle that was developed in Hungary by a man named Andreas Pito. And their whole philosophy is that we are all capable of learning and doing more as long as we're given the supports and the ability to do that. You know, we have to be taught how to do these things. It also believes that learning occurs everywhere, and learning occurs best when integrated with activities. So you can see how that aligns really well with what we're doing at Up Academy, and why it's the kind of the base of our neurodevelopment program, and how our students interact with and move around the environment, because it's designed to be interactive with everything that we do. And the whole neurodevelopment program is designed to keep students engaged, consistent with peers, so their academics is consistent, so that their movement is consistent, so that the way they deal with their environment is consistent, and just becomes, you know, easier for them to gain that independence and academic success.
And we know it is that tangible experience that is and that's what's creating that pathways in your brain, and that's stored as memory in the brain, and that's a scientific fact. That's just great. Thanks, Tanya. Tanya, in your advocacy journey to try and secure a preschool for Eliza, you found that education policies have very superficially addressed the issue of inclusion of schools. What was your discovery and resolution to address this?
Well, I mean, going back to preschool, it was really a challenge, because preschools all have different licensing and regulations than, you know, regular K-12 schools do. And so we, in our preschool journey, we're fortunate to find a preschool that just said, you know what, go ahead and bring her, and bring an aide, and we'd love to have her, and we believe in diversity and inclusion. And we were happy with that arrangement as well. So it worked out well for all of us. But, you know, as we look at, you know, we look at our school system and how we're making inclusion happen, you know, it is a broader issue, and part of our vision of Up Academy is to create the method of education and then be able to share it, to show others how to do this, and how to create a truly inclusive environment, and how to shift our framework of knowledge so that it serves all of our students. But we really struggled with it. You know, we struggled in the school district, and we struggled in preschool, and it led us to forge our own way. Right? That's, you know, necessity is always the birth of invention comes from necessity. You know, and so we needed something for our daughter that didn't exist. And I've got 2 other children, so I needed something for all of my kids to work together and to gain the skills to be successful in the future, and it didn't exist.
And you know, it's important to move from a view of a fatalistic mindset to being possible, to being progressive, to being productive. That's, I think, a great challenge, because sometimes we look at all of the barriers, and we look at all of the roadblocks, and we think it's not going to make a difference, it's not going to make a change. But you know, Up Academy is a great I think evidence, a great a school to show that if you push through, things are going to develop and come into manifestation. Thank you, Tanya, for that. What are your top key takeaways for reimagining education? Tanya.
Sure. I am going to share the screen again, just because I think that they're important to be able to see as well as hear. Our key takeaways to make education special for everyone is that first, all students are capable learners. If we respect our students, if we trust our students that they're telling us what they need, and if we listen to them and share in their interests and find their strengths, we'll really understand that all students are capable learners. And they'll tell us a lot of times how to best support them. And if not, their behaviors will tell us that what we're doing isn't working and we need to find another way. But that core belief that we can all learn and there are greater possibilities for each of us. I think the next one, like we were just talking about with the neuroscience of learning, is combining concepts with experiences. How can we, there's a difference between doing a full-blown months-long project and doing an activity with a lesson, but both of them are very valid and very helpful and useful ways of learning. And so anytime we can combine an experience with a concept and get students active and engaged in their learning, it definitely makes a difference and moves the needle. Creating an environment for the learning experience you want to create. And this is one that we didn't talk a lot about, but this is definitely an area where education, that's really important to education, is being in the right space and in the right place. I had a talk recently with Jill Akers, who does international consulting with different educational organizations on how to build their space for optimal learning, and creating a large space for collaboration and smaller spaces for quiet learning, and a library for researching and finding information, and places to build and places to be creative and places, to work together, and places for group learning and places for small group learning, but creating that environment. My father-in-law talks about a teacher that he knew, and I call it the Clothespin Story because she used clothespins. But she would kind of set up each week what the students needed to accomplish. And she'd have learning centers around the rooms for these things that the students needed to do. And so when they finished the task that they needed to do, maybe it was chapter 3 in their math book, maybe it was reading chapter 4 in their literature book, but they get to choose each day which center they're going to and what they're working on. And then they'd take their clothespin and switch it from not done to done. So as they got towards the end of the week, they could go and look at their clothespin string and say, oh, these are the things that I haven't finished yet. I need to go work on these activities. Yeah. And so she's created this amazing environment for student-centered learning where when they struggle, they can come ask for help, but otherwise they're kind of left to manage their time and figure out what they need to do, and also do it on their own time, because sometimes you don't feel like math. Sometimes you'd rather sit and read a book. Yeah. And it's allowing students that flexibility and listening to the students, but creating an environment where that's possible for them. Yeah. And we talked a lot about influencing action in the world around you. So how do we create experiences and create an environment where our students can be active in their communities, in sustainability, in creating a change, in using their skills that they're learning in school to create something meaningful in the world around them? And that can be done in so many different ways. This past year, we used Herald for our project. This next year, we're looking at how to be a change maker is our first project. And so we're looking at talking with communities and saying, can we create a change maker mural for you in the community somewhere? But just how do you find those experiences where students can really see that the skills and the knowledge and the concepts that they're learning are important and relevant in the world, and that people care about their ideas. And so incorporating those actions. So those are my 4 key takeaways for really making a shift in education. Seeing everyone as capable learners, creating project experiences, combining concepts with experiences, creating the right environment, and then finding a way for students to put it all together to influence action in the world around them.
Thank you, Tanya. Tanya, I wish I had another hour block with you, but in one sentence, Tanya, the future of school is, or the future of schools is?
The future of schools is listening to our students and creating a world where we can all live together, where everyone is capable, where everyone's ideas and experiences are seen as productive and useful and helpful, so that we can all be citizens of a global world.
Thank you, Tanya Sheckley. This has been an information-packed session, and there's so much more we need to be learning about setting up an environment for inclusive education. As you've mentioned, we will be inviting our viewers to get in touch with you and with the Inspired team to pursue this further, if necessary, through our conference communication platforms. Tanya Sheckley, thank you so much for joining us. This is Inspired Conference Day 1, Future of Schools. Thank you.
Thank you. That looks wonderful. I look forward to connecting with everyone as the conference takes off. So thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.